All right, this is it. Move that there. And hey, everybody, welcome to the first Tipsy Tagalongs podcast. And this is also part of our ongoing American Wine Journey series. I'm Gary Moore with Journey More Often, and we have here
Cody.
Ben Cody with 1723 Vineyards. So this event is co-sponsored between 1723 Vineyards and Journey More Often. Today's American Wine Journey topic is what to look for in a wine.
Yep.
The Tipsy Tagalongs, goal for today is tasting a wine. So that goes perfectly hand in hand together, and we'll be able to talk to everybody. And by the time this is over, hopefully you'll have a greater understanding and go, oh, that's why I do this, or I should be doing that, but I never knew. So we're going to be doing that. First of all, we got to get some public service announcements out of the way. We always advocate drinking responsibly. That's just the way we roll that way. Always drink responsibly. And in 2 weeks, Tipsy Tagalongs will be at Kennick Brewing Company, so you can join us there, and we'll be tasting some beer. But let's get started, right?
Sounds good.
All right, so the first thing that we're going to taste is the Chardonnay.
That's right, white wine.
Ben, tell us a little bit about this Chardonnay.
Well, you want to know what I look for in a wine. The first thing is alcohol.
Yeah, right?
No, this is... I'm really excited about what we're doing here today because so many people can be intimidated by wine tasting because they think, oh, there's only a certain way to do it, and if I don't do it a certain way, I'll look stupid. And I hope we can dispel a lot of that and demystify all this tasting stuff and help people enjoy it even more than they already are. This wine is a white wine, at the risk of stating the obvious. It's a wine that we, like with all of our wines, we grow all of our fruit here. So fruit's grown right outside. The wine's made right here in the winery and never leaves the place. This grape is it's got a unique flavor profile. It's very crisp. It's very acidic. It's a great summertime wine. It can be good in the winter too, depending on what you're pairing it with. But a lot of tropical fruits and things like that. But we'll talk about that tasting here in a minute.
So it's a white wine.
Yep.
And it's crisp, which tells me it's probably not got any oak influence then.
No.
It's a steel cask. So, that's boom, right out of the gate. It's a white wine, and you can finish a wine, you can age a wine in different media. There's concrete, there's steel, there's oak, there's different types of oak. And there's even oak, that has been previously aged with bourbon, and there's a lot of different options that you have for aging a wine. But this wine is aged in a steel cask, which means it is going to be crisper. It's going to have probably some citrusy notes, and you're going to be able to probably smell that and taste it when you go in. So first thing we do is, first of all, it's always good to have a stemmed glass. We were talking about this just before we started. The importance of the stem glass is that if you have your hands on the glass itself, it will warm up the wine, and it can actually change the flavor profile of the wine, and significantly in some cases. So you always, if you can use a stem glass, that's the best way to go. Now, if you don't have one, you just don't touch it very often to keep that influence away.
Yeah, I like a stem too, especially with the white, because a lot of times I kind of like to look at the edge of the wine itself. You see people do stuff like this. They're looking to see if the wine's been oxidized at all, and if it has, there'll be a brown ring around it. And with the stem glass, it's just a lot easier because you don't get your fingerprints all over the.
Yeah.
There's just something that's gross about that.
Yeah,
I like my glass to be clean, and especially for a white wine, because the stem keeps you from getting your grubby fingerprints all over it.
Yeah, well,
this gets real oily, so I have a huge problem with leaving fingerprints everywhere.
Everybody's got oily hands. I hate to say that, but in that light, when we're only tasting 3 here, in some cases, if you go to a wine tasting in, say, Sonoma Valley or Napa Valley, and you're tasting 5 or 6 at one shot, and you have a stemless glass, that glass is going to be smudged completely by the time you finish if you're like handling it all the time. So the stem glass is good. And what you want to do, if you want to smell it first, which is kind of interesting. People are like, well, how, what's that get? What do I get out of that? Well, you can tell the different flavor profiles of the wine by smelling. And you want to take your nose at the edge of the glass and move the glass so that your nose is in the center by the time you finish taking a breath. And that gives you a really good, and you can taste this, you can smell the citrus in this one, which is really, really cool. And then when you're tasting, you want to taste it. You do like a little bit. Now, wait, if you don't do a little bit, if you do a lot, you're just going to choke yourself and you're going to end up coughing a lot. But if you just take just a wee bit of wine and then you breathe air through your mouth, that also gives you, and that actually gave me a floral taste as well as citrus. So
keep it on your tongue. That's the key thing. Is not like mouthwash. Keep it on your tongue when you do it.
You don't run it around your mouth and yeah. Because some people do that. Now, I mean, there's people in the world whose olfactory senses and their taste senses are so specific. They can smell the wine, and they can taste the wine, and they can tell you what the wine is, what vineyard it came from, which side of the hill it came from, what year it is, and what the weather was in that, when the grapes were growing. Now we're not at that level. Well, and I don't know. Maybe you are. Ben.
No, I'm not. And look, those guys are pretty talented. Sometimes they get lucky too. But there is something to it. I tell you, there's there are tells. Certainly, there's certain tells based on what region that wine came from.
Yeah.
And especially the more you try different wines from different regions, you can get pretty good at it. Just going off a smell for sure. Especially if it's an aromatic wine. This wine has Chardonnay is really high in a set of compounds called terpenes, which is what gives it this floral flavor. Viognier is another grape that has a lot of terpenes.
Yes.
Albarino is a grape that has a lot of terpenes. Riesling does too. Chardonnay does not, as a for example.
Right. Yeah, and so
nor does Sauv B.
That's why a lot of Chardonnay is oaked and in an oak barrel, because it's perfect for that.
Well, they call it a blank canvas. When
you can do either with it.
Sometimes it needs a little help developing some flavor profiles. So you put it in oak, and it gives it a better mouthfeel, because Chardonnay can be real thin.
Yes.
Especially if it's from a cooler climate and you do it in steel, it's going to be pretty thin wine, which is why they resort to barrel aging.
Yeah.
We don't do a lot of that here, just because I've done a lot of research on consumer preference. The consumer preference is almost, there's a lot of people that do love those oak Chardonnays, but they're in the minority.
Yeah, and to your point earlier, this is the perfect summer wine. When you're outside and it's 90 degrees, you're going to have to control yourself from consuming it too quickly, because it's that crisp and it's that light, and it tastes, it has a really good wine taste to it on the at the same time. So when you're doing that, it's easy to drink too fast. So you want to have a driver, obviously, but when you're looking at that, it's perfect for the summer. Personally, I'll drink a red until it gets 90 degrees.
Yeah.
Once it clips 90 degrees, then I'll think about, do I want something a little lighter? But in the meantime, so let's talk about the difference, when you're finishing or aging wine. What's the difference between concrete, steel, and oak?
Yeah, so steel is all about preserving that acidity, that crispness, that freshness, all those things. Oak, on the other hand, creating a much more rounder wine. Almost any kind of wine in oak, especially if we're talking whites, is meant to be paired with something that's got like a lot of butter or things like that. So it's super round, and it has a thicker mouthfeel. You're typically going to want to serve it at a higher temperature. Concrete, and a lot of what that barrel is doing is oxidizing, doing micro-oxidation on that wine, which is part of what makes it round. And concrete is just a way of doing that without picking up oak flavor because the concrete will also exchange.
It absorbs some of the there's a back and forth.
It's just another way of oxidizing the wine at a micro level, but you don't get the oak flavor, which some people don't want.
Now, not a lot of people use concrete anymore. I've been to Spain and France where they had one of them actually had a series of concrete tanks.
Yeah.
I mean, it was a large set of tanks, and you had a manhole to get in and out of the tank, and they said they had to maintain those tanks like on like 3 years, like they were in them again to maintain them to make sure that the wine.
They're hard to clean, and then if you don't maintain them, then your wine's gonna eventually turn to vinegar.
Right.
So they're super hard to clean. Whereas with a barrel, you can replace that barrel.
Yeah.
That's why that concrete, you're kind of stuck with it, and they're hard to clean.
Yeah, and that's a tough one. We also saw the concrete eggs.
Yeah.
We were at one winery in Spain. These concrete eggs that were literally hundreds of years old. That was fascinating to see that. And they weren't using them all. I think they were using them to say they use them because it's really difficult in a concrete egg like that.
Yeah.
But I mean, the wine still tasted really good.
Yeah.
But it's difficult in a concrete egg. So then, most of it, it's either in what we do in this country, it's mostly either steel or an oak barrel.
Mm-hmm.
Occasionally, I've seen it in steel with concrete shards, or not concrete shards. I'm sorry, oak shards.
Oh yeah, that's
to hang pieces of freshly.
You can, if you're looking for a.
Gives you just a
little bit,
a tinge of flavor,
That's
not the same as an oak barrel.
Here, at least in the States, where I've seen concrete used too, it's because they want the oxidation, and they'll wind up blending it with a wine that's been in an oak barrel too. So it's kind of a way to split the difference, and have a lighter oak influence, but have all the oxidation. But 90% of the vast majority of oaked wines is going to be Chardonnay in America. Anyway.
Right, exactly.
At least of whites, 75.
And some Sauvignon Blanc.
Occasionally, although I find that if you're looking for an oaky Sauvi B, it's probably going to come from Europe as opposed to here more often than not. But people do use them some.
Yeah, and then the barrel itself has different characteristics which can change the flavor profile. For instance, the size of the barrel.
Yep.
So the bigger the barrel, the less the influence because there's not as much. There's more superficial opportunity, but not
you just don't have as much
surface per volume is different than if you have a smaller barrel. The surface per volume is much more a much larger ratio. And then when you're looking at the barrel itself, is it a toasted barrel?
Yeah.
Is it raw or is it toasted? If it's toasted, is it lightly toasted, medium toasted, heavy toasted?
Yeah.
And let's talk about that for a second because there are different wines you put in different toasts.
Yeah.
And how does that work?
It comes into play a lot with reds. With whites, it's almost always a medium toast. You typically would never go heavier than that with a white. But so we're talking mainly reds, and they just impart different flavors. I've never seen anybody use the light toast, either medium plus,
right,
long, medium, slow, heavy. It's that end of the spectrum, and what you get is on the front end of it, on the lighter end of that spectrum, you're getting a lot of spices, baking spices and things like that. If it's American oak, you'll get a lot of vanilla. You won't get that with French oak. And then as you move through the spectrum, you're starting to get a lot of more coffee and chocolate and
leather,
earthy
taste. Has anybody ever, and you're drinking this wine and you're thinking, what's an earthy taste?
Yeah, sometimes it can almost be meaty.
Yeah.
It can almost be a meaty flavor. So, and then on the heavier end of the spectrum, you're imparting, the oak will impart less tannin. So on the lighter end of the spectrum, you can pick up some tannin from the barrel if you're looking for it. So that's a consideration. The biggest thing is the forest selection which is not unique to each cooper, but each cooper has different access to different types of wood within different
Right.
forests, and that's a big deal.
But what's a Cooper? I mean,
Oh, it's the barrel maker.
yeah. So I mean, in today's world, we're not familiar with, because the Cooper is almost like a days gone by kind of guy.
Yeah.
There aren't that many Coopers anymore. And how many certified Coopers are there in the country? I think there's like
Not many here in America. I mean, there'd be more in Europe.
yeah,
but
certified like master Coopers. I think there's like a dozen or so, or 2 dozen or
wouldn't
so.
be
I
very
think.
many.
Yeah.
Wouldn't be very many.
And
We don't make much. Most of those barrels. Well, I remember a lot of the American barrels are made, and the wood almost always comes from Missouri or Virginia or Pennsylvania. So they're actually here, closer to here than they are on the West Coast. They don't really make many barrels out on the West Coast.
Right, right. So where do those barrels go? Do they go to Kentucky for their bourbon, or
Well, that's
Tennessee
that's
for their
part
whiskey?
of it. That's your part of it. But I mean, we use some American oak here. So other wineries around the country do. In fact,
Right.
some American oak. We have a mutual friend, Gabriel, talks about how the Argentinian wineries use American oak. I said, well, why are they doing that? He said, well, when you're somewhere, I said, why do Americans want to use French oak? Because it's different, and they think it's cool. And like when you're down in Argentina, let's use American oak.
yeah, it's what do you call it?
People always.
It's exotic,
It's
It
exotic,
makes the
thank you.
wine more exotic,
That's the thing.
And you're looking at it and going, oh wait, no, that's
For me, it's always been about what's going to make my wine taste good.
So yeah, I've
which
seen
has taken
some.
a long time to figure. Well, I think it's always tasted good, but I really feel good about having that dialed in now. It's taken a lot of experimentation.
Well, yeah, and it's wine tasting, it does just that. The more wine you taste, the more your, when you talk about a palate, the more your palate can differentiate here and there, versus if you don't taste as much wine.
Yeah.
And there's nothing wrong with that. It's just a question of, okay, so the more you do it, the more you understand, okay, this is what I'm tasting, and this is because it's a repetitional scenario. If I can make up a word, repetitional. Just put an L on it.
It's your podcast, man.
Yeah,
You can do whatever you want.
I guess I can. So Webster's picked that up in next year's dictionary. So when we're looking at the effect or the influence of oak, it can bring out a ton of different flavors, like you were mentioning earlier. And the heavier the toast, the fuller body the flavor is going to be when you're talking about that. And it's difficult because when you're first tasting wine, this is the tough part. When you're first tasting wine, you taste a red, and you're like, where do they get coffee out of this?
Yeah.
So when you take it and you start to capture the scent of it, you start to bring your mouth into that flavor, then you go, oh, it does, and so, but sometimes they just throw coffee in there for it should, but
what I would tell people is don't like if you don't taste
but don't worry about it.
Don't worry about it. And sometimes sometimes those tasting notes are suggestive. If you tell somebody that it has coffee or butter, whatever, right? Pick your thing.
My favorite is definitely leather.
Yeah,
it's like
you'll find yourself. I find it, but just be careful. I shouldn't say be careful. Just be aware of the power of suggestion and think for yourself and taste for yourself. And just because somebody else tasted something doesn't mean you have to taste that, or you're wrong if you don't taste it, or you're somehow inferior or defective. So don't let people do that to you.
So despite the description, and this is the takeaway. Despite the description, the wine tastes like it tastes when you taste it.
Yeah.
So it's about your taste and how you experience it, and obviously, you started off with the alcohol thing, and we've said it before. It's whether you like wine or not. That's what makes a good wine, is whether you like it or not. So you're looking at it from your perspective. It's an individual perspective.
That's right.
And out of how many billion people are there in the world, we're all going to have a different perspective on the same
wine.
wine.
So much of it's impacted by. We all have the level of taste buds on your tongue and all those things. But just you taste what you taste. And Sarah, I don't like having tasting notes, but consumers like it. So by popular demand, I put those on our menu here.
Yeah.
But I hate doing that because I feel like I want people to taste what they want. But people like that, so we put it on there. But don't feel like you got to follow. The audience shouldn't feel like they have to follow that, or they're defective if they can't.
Exactly. But when you're tasting something, you can relay your experience into the notes.
Yeah.
And that's the key. It's not that, I didn't taste I didn't smell the citrus, because not everybody does. And I didn't smell the citrus. I didn't smell this, or I didn't taste that. It's not about that. It's about what your experience is. This. It was smooth.
Yeah.
It was full bodied. It was, light. It was crisp. It was, so all of those things are things that you're going to want to, nail down. Are we almost ready for the
Oh, sure. Yeah.
the rosé?
Yeah.
So, all those things that are aspects of the wine are going to be things that you as the consumer are going to want to write down there. And like Ben said, keep in mind the note section. That can, by the way, that can change. Because today,
Fantastic.
you might experience one thing, and then this has happened to my wife and I, Diane. She's with the American Wine Journey. We travel a lot. We do this, but we've done a lot of wine tasting. We brought wine home, and doesn't happen a lot, but occasionally we'll open up a bottle and go, why did we buy that? Because we were there, we liked it while we were there. It might have been an experience that we enjoyed while we were there, but we wouldn't buy it normally.
Yeah, I got
at home.
I got two things on that. So, one, that's always you'll find that a lot when you go to a winery. Maybe you love if you bought a bottle, you loved it, right? Or you really liked it. You brought it home and it doesn't taste good. There's two or three things about that. One is that and people say, well, the wine always tastes best at the winery. Well, why is that? Well, we optimize a bunch of environmental factors.
Exactly.
Not to inflate the quality of the wine, but just because we want people to be able to experience the wine fully. So there's a bunch of things. It's crazy when I take a bottle here and have a glass here. I can take it even to my own house.
Right.
How much different it will taste, because here, like at the winery, we encourage the tasting team not to wear perfume. We've got
Good point.
We've got the air climate controlled here. It is everything. The temperature is just right. When you go in your house, you've got all those smells, very good smells typically from the food that you cooked. Maybe you're burning a candle. Maybe you've got soaps in that house, and all those things can interfere with in particular your smell. But the smell plays such a key role in the taste that like if I'm really like when Gabriel and I are making wine here, when we're trying to, especially when it's fermenting and we're trying to smell it and understand how the wine's evolving, we'll actually walk outside.
Yeah.
To do it
because it's a sensory distraction.
Oh yeah.
You're looking at, and that was an excellent point about if you're going to go to a wine tasting, dial way back on the cologne and the perfume.
Yeah.
Use an unscented lotion if you're, if you need to, lotion your skin. Make all of that so that it does take away from the distraction and the smell, and when you're experiencing that, and it won't be interfering. And like you said, when you're cooking dinner. Well, by the way, when you're cooking dinner, sometimes the wine tastes even better.
Well, that was my second point. That was the second thing I was going to say.
Sorry, I cut you off.
No, you're good. You're good. I'm glad you brought me back.
I stole his thunder on that.
No, I'm glad you brought me back to that, because a couple of days ago we were, we did a harvest dinner with the team here. It's something we do every year, and most wineries do it. And I always bring out a wine from the cellar. And this year I brought out a 2017 Cabernet Franc, which hadn't sold, and we sold out of that wine that year. But
you didn't invite me for that?
I didn't, man. I didn't have enough wine to invite you.
Wait, the email went into my my spam.
I didn't have enough wine to invite this guy. So anyway, I went, and it was at a local restaurant here, a fantastic restaurant. Everybody had a great time. The food was phenomenal. And when I opened that wine, I thought, oh my God, this has got to be the best red I ever made. And look, it's a good wine. Obviously, I wouldn't have broken it out for a special occasion.
Right.
I'm like, I love this wine, but I don't even remember it being even this good. And then so the next night at home, I thought, I'm gonna open that thing again, and it was good, but it wasn't quite as good because they're at the restaurant, you're with your friends, that restaurant had a great ambiance, there was great background music, the food was fantastic, and when you're in that moment, it
tastes different.
It'll take everyone, no matter how bad or how good it is, it'll elevate it. And so your frame of mind and that experience and who you're with
Yeah.
It makes a huge difference.
It really does. It really, and your purpose for doing the wine tasting. If your purpose for doing the wine tasting is to hit like 7 different wineries in a 6-hour period, then you're going to taste the wine differently. You know,
yeah.
so my recommendation is not to do that. Now, now that you've mentioned you opened up a bottle of 2017, you can't. So the one fallacy that people, or you know, that go, you know, oh, you can keep a red forever, or you know, and it's you're looking at it and going, well, no, there are some wines that there's actually a shelf life.
No, all of them.
You know, so they do. By the way, you know, if you go into, I was in a restaurant a Grey Cliff restaurant in Nassau, Bahamas. They break out the wine menu.
Yeah.
The cheapest wine on the menu was like $440, right?
Nice.
Well, yeah.
You
So
vacation at some nice places.
well, no, yeah. This was yeah. We were treating ourselves that particular night, and but the most expensive wine was $15,000. Right, and I think it was like 80 years old. And the reality of it is, you don't get a guarantee on that. So you can open up that wine, and it could taste like vinegar, or it could taste like great wine, or anything in between.
And you might not even like it.
Yeah.
I mean, those old wines, they
They're so
develop a
guaranteed.
profile. And it's not even like they're bad or what, but it's like you may not like old wines. And
Right,
I would be the
right.
first to tell you that I've had some old wines, some really old wines, and I didn't like them that much. But that's just me. Now, look, some people they're to die for. But
so you know, what's the recommendation? How long to keep a wine? And you know, and the environment that you keep the wine in, it makes a big difference as well.
If you don't have a good place to keep it, you don't want to keep it long.
If you don't have air conditioning, you know, and it's 90 degrees for like 3 weeks solid,
or even 3 days,
that wine's going to be on the edge for
Yeah.
sure. So you want to keep a wine in a cool but not necessarily cold
That's right.
environment. You know, the coldest spot in the house, if you know.
Closet, something like
Yeah,
that. Interior
you know,
closet.
but not don't, you know, unless it's a white, you don't have to keep it in the fridge.
No, and you don't want to do that. You don't want to keep them in there because
it's going to take up room.
They're going to. Yeah. So I think people want to know what the wines that age pretty well. Number one, they're going to have quite a bit of alcohol. The alcohol acts as a preservative in and of itself. Also, too, they'll have a relatively low pH, which means it has high acidity. I mean, think back to I know you know, but for the audience, you know, think back to your high school chemistry if you can, and the lower the pH, that means you have higher acidity. So, acidity and alcohol help preserve the wine, help it age.
Exactly. Which is its own flavor and taste profile.
Yeah.
And you know, and we've been to wineries. You know, we did go to a winery in Mendoza, and they actually recommended. They said you can buy this bottle of wine, but we don't recommend that. We were there in 2013.
Yeah.
We were there in 2013. They said don't open it until 2023.
Yeah.
So this year we're going to open that bottle of wine. Probably at some point we'll have an American Wine Journey to tell you how it came out.
Especially with reds, because it takes a lot of time for those.
Yeah.
What we call the tannins in the wine, that they need to come together to form long tannins after fermentation. They're called short tannins, and that's why a lot of young red wines are what we call tight, which means they don't have a lot. They're there. They don't have a lot of fruit flavor. So, you know, reds and
exactly
need some time, but. One thing I want to say, too, before we lose sight of it, because we'll be moving on soon, is the temperature of the wine itself. Like Sarah can taste white or rosé wine at refrigerator temperature, and she can tell you a lot about it. We serve wine here at about 50 degrees.
Right.
The reds and the whites and the rosés. I have to have it relatively warm for me even to be able to taste it. What's so funny is I'm tasting this rosé. This is Sarah's favorite wine that we're selling right now.
Right.
So we always have a bottle of that in the fridge, and like I can barely taste it. And I get up here and think, man, this wine is really good. And but I can't back at home when Sarah brings it out of the fridge, like I can't even taste it. So now that's probably somewhat unique to me. I'm not saying that's a universal truth, but I encourage people to think about temperature.
There are a lot of people who are in your scenario where, you know, another 10 degrees, 60 degrees. So it's still chilled slightly, but it's not cold. And it means it means a lot when it comes to, you know, when you're trying to experience it, you know, both from a smell perspective and a taste perspective. So sometimes you just need to let the bottle, you know, out air, and well, we got to talk about airing it out
Yeah.
as well. Sometimes you just need to let the bottle out for a little while, and then put it in some sort of chilled container, so that you don't lose sight of the flavor of the wine. Because for me, it's all about the flavor of the wine. So if I'm close, I'm sort of in between, but I'm closer to Sarah with regard to I can drink something that is like right out of the fridge, and I'm good, and
Yeah.
I can deal with that. But I can taste more flavor, somewhere not quite as warm as what you like it, but
Yeah.
a little warmer than out of the fridge.
Yeah.
So that's what you have to find out, what works for you as far as what you're wine tasting. Let's profile this wine for a minute. Now, a rosé is typical. Most rosés are red grapes.
Mm-hmm.
There are some white grape. I saw a white grape rosé. I think it was in Switzerland,
Mm-hmm.
but they cheated. It was a white grape rosé, but they had thrown just enough skins and then pulled them back out again to have a tint to it. So all they did is actually add they just added color. But the vast majority of rosés are a red wine.
Yeah.
Although
Red grape.
typically you'll find them on the white wine part of the menu in a restaurant.
Yeah.
Because it's not like that
Yeah.
deep red that you're going to see when we look at the Petit Verdot. So it's a red wine, and so tell us why the color isn't as prominent while it's still a red wine.
Usually it's because you press the grapes really fast. They don't the juice does not sit on the skins for very long.
Mm-hmm.
The longer it sits on there, the more color it extracts. Color comes in the form of a compound called anthocyanins, if you want to impress your friends. So in this case, when I made this wine, we actually did a whole cluster press and didn't have any skin contact whatsoever. And then I actually, although this is all Cab Franc, it's pure Cab Franc, and what I did later to add color to that is blend in a traditional red Cab Franc into that wine to create the color
Just
profile.
a bit, enough to change the
Yeah,
color.
and it changed the flavor a little bit too, because that actually came from a barrel. So it was a classic Cab Franc, spent 2 years in a barrel, blah blah blah
right,
blah blah. Right. So I had basically what was almost a white wine, made from pressing Cab Franc immediately.
Right.
From pressing it immediately with no skin contact, and then so I could have complete control over the color profile, I blended Cab Franc, a red Cab Franc, back in with it. In fact, it was the same vintage and everything. So that's a pretty unique way of making. As you suggest, there's several ways.
Yes.
You can crush them and let them sit on the skins for a while. You can take a white wine and blend a little bit of red with it. That's another way. We make a rosé like that here too. The other interesting way of doing it is just to take a red wine and crush it, and then about a little bit a ways through the fermentation, you bleed it. It's called sagenet.
Right.
Bleed. And that, what you're really doing there is they're not real serious about making a rosé when they do that. What they're doing is trying to increase the concentration of their red. So what they're really doing is trying to improve their red wine, and they're making a rosé as a byproduct, and that's cool. Like
Yeah.
I'm not throwing rocks, but I'm just saying, like, if you're really serious about a rosé, you probably wouldn't make it that way.
Right. So this rosé in particular, it's Cab Franc.
Yeah, 100% Franc.
100%, and that means, and then from the press and the
barrel.
Yeah, so that's pretty cool. So that's why it has, it's very dry, which is good. I love it.
Yeah,
I love that part
it's
of it.
bone dry.
And what does dry mean, by the way? So when you talk about what is a dry wine,
there's. It has no perception of sweetness. Although, interestingly enough, you can have the level of alcohol will impact the perception of sweetness. This has a fair bit of alcohol. Why this tastes especially dry is because I blended in some of that wine from a barrel, which is, Franc from a barrel has got a lot of tannin and is really a super dry wine.
This is really good.
It kind of kills any real fruity, sweety kind of flavors. Even though
Right.
I don't make wine with sugar of any kind, but
But you
like
can still taste some,
some.
and
That's why we had a lot of fun playing around with it. That's kind of why I like making it this way. It gives me total control.
which is what winemakers do, by the way. Winemakers like to play around with the
They do.
production of the grape and the wine itself, and that creates the winery's profile of their wines.
Yeah.
And so what you don't see normally, if you're going in for a wine tasting, you don't normally see the mad scientist part of the winery.
That's some of the most, that's the biggest fun.
The lab. They have labs. It's because there's a certain way you have to make wines, and and the government gets in and says you got to do you got to do this and you got to do that. So they have to double check and make sure that all of that is occurring, and so that's safe for you to drink. I mean, realistically, that's the purpose of it. But they have a lab and they tinker. They really do tinker, and I've been in a couple of winery labs, and it's hysterical to watch the tinkering, because sometimes it's just like the typical I spilled my glass into this glass, but most of the time it's basically you're just playing around with the environment.
It gets wilder as the day goes on.
Right.
Depends on how much you had to drink.
Yeah, you're playing around with the environment, and you're looking at.
We don't always pour. We don't always put it back in the thing. So
No,
it can be pretty fun.
Oh, which is something that technically, when you're doing a wine tasting, you should spit it into the spittoon.
Nah, you can think about it. You don't have to. If you're driving, you need to. But if you don't, if you're not,
yeah.
Look, what I do is. Some of it I do. I don't even know if I spit it, but what I'll do is, like, if I don't want the whole thing and I'm really trying to pace myself, is
right.
You don't have to taste it. You can pour some of it just into it.
Right.
So, yeah, and you can spit if you really want. For me to get the full flavor of a wine, I need to swallow it.
Yeah.
But the trick is just you don't have to drink everything that somebody pours you. If you're trying to pace yourself all day, then just don't drink all of it.
And I've done that before. Sometimes my wife and I will literally share a tasting.
I think that's a really smart thing to do, especially if you're in a situation where maybe I'm like you. I don't like to go to more than about 3 wineries a day if I'm in some wineries, because I feel like my palate gets real tired.
It destroys your palate.
But let's just say you're in a scenario where you're with a group and they're going to see 5 or 6 wineries a day. That's okay. There's nothing. You're not doing something wrong. But really, if you want to kind of keep your wits about you, and you want to be able to taste more later in the day,
right?
Like just don't you don't have to drink everything they pour.
That's by the way, that's where your palate is by the end of the day is a really good. That's another discussion.
Yeah.
Because as we were preparing for this particular podcast, we were talking about, okay, so do we do crackers? Do we do cheese?
Yeah.
Do we do meat? Because a lot of people do like the meat and cheese and the crackers and stuff like that. But here, as we were talking about earlier, a lot of different foods change the flavor profile of the wine itself.
Oh, hugely.
And so you want to, but believe it or not, cheese is great while you're drinking wine. But if you're tasting wine, you may want to stick with just the basic cracker.
Yeah, because those cheeses, it's like any other kind of food. We should have a podcast on this, on pairing. But, some of those cheeses will clash, with certain types of wine. Like something like a brie will go with almost anything. But, like, you get into cheddars or...
like a sharp cheddar.
Like, you try and drink that with a red wine, and it will this is going to be a bad experience.
Yeah, so you got to be careful about that. So you may not like the wine because you just ate that cheese.
That's right.
And so you want to make sure that you're not adversely affecting your wine tasting. So the cracker scenario, just a regular saltine with salt and blah, blah, blah. Something to take away what's going on in your mouth and create. And then, of course, you're going to want to hydrate. Not just because you may be drinking wine, but because it also helps wash the flavor of the previous wine out of there. So, if you're doing all that, then you're going to get the fullest experience of the wine tasting. So these are just things that believe me, when we first started tasting wines, we didn't know what to do either. So these are things that we picked up along the way. Ben has clearly picked up a lot more than I have because...
I don't know about that, but when it comes to wine and food, I practice a lot.
Well, we do too.
I practice even more than you have, Gary.
Yeah. We should have Diane here
If that's
because
possible.
Diane can pick out. She's like, oh, these really go together, and then she'll like taste the wine. And then she'll like run into the kitchen and she'll grab stuff. So, and then she'll put like peanut butter and apple and a particular type of cracker together, and I'm like, what are you eating? And she's like, it's great.
Seriously, that's worthy of a whole podcast.
We are going to do that. Maybe
that's
this is podcast number 5 for American Wine Journey. Maybe that's American Wine Journey podcast 6. Because I think that's
there's a big deal. People ask about that all the time.
How do you pair it? What do you pair it with?
Well, and especially it becomes people get really anxious about that around the holidays in particular, because they're trying to put on a nice event for friends and family, and they want to have everything just be perfect, right? And it's pairing is hard. I used to normally just despise it, but I got sucked into it so many times,
right?
Because I'm in the business. I finally just bit the bullet and said, well, I made a decision, look, I'm going to get good at this. And I'm not telling you I'm God's gift at pairing, but I've made a decision that I'm going to figure out how to do this.
Right.
And I've gotten pretty decent at it. Although, again, I'm not telling you there aren't people even better than me, but I think once you break through that barrier and kind of embrace it, I could love to, we can, we will collectively give our audience here some pointers on that.
We'll actually dedicate. It sounds like the next podcast.
It'd be a lot of fun
because it's not an art; it's a science.
Yeah.
And so it's not but the problem with the science is, and the problem with holiday gatherings is, you have if you invited a dozen people, you've got a dozen different palates.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so when you're trying to pair something, you want to make sure that pairing is going to go for, at least a hung jury. You're going to get 11 out of 12 that are going to enjoy the pairing.
Yeah.
Hopefully you'll get all 12 out of 12 and you'll have a unanimous decision that, hey, this was the right wine for this. Because you can get, it's steak. It's a red wine.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, but no, right? Yeah. So there's a bunch of different red wines that you can get, and some of them are going to just go, wow, this steak is so good with this red wine. And you're going to go, other ones you're going to go, oh, this pairs pretty well.
Yeah.
And it's not bad. It just, my personal philosophy on, what pairs with what is, you look at it, the bolder the flavor of the food, the bolder the flavor of the wine.
Yeah.
And so when you're looking at that, you're going, wait, what? Wait. And in that scenario, you can actually have a red with fish.
Yeah. Yeah, you can.
You can have a red with fish where you would normally go. People are like, oh, fish, that's a white wine. I just need a white wine. Not necessarily, probably, but not necessarily.
Especially if it's like you can compare swordfish, for example, with something like that PV.
Exactly.
They're both real dry.
Yeah. So when I look, and there are certain wines that just go well with certain foods.
Flesh, I just mean it's a very, it's just a real firm meat with a lot of astringency.
It's a steak.
Yeah, it is a steak.
It's basically a steak when you're eating that swordfish, and so a good red will go with that. So it's not even like you're going to go for a lighter red. You're going to go for a deep red, and it's going to.
Let's go for a deep red here.
Yeah, I think so.
One faux pas we're committing here is we are drinking out of the same glass. What I find is that.
But that's what you will do if you go to a winery.
Well, but what's funny is you're going to be smelling the wine you had in there previously.
You will.
It's not a bad thing, but sometimes that can mask the aromas of the wine that you're currently tasting.
Right. And the other thing that you want to make sure is that the glass is empty.
Yeah.
So.
I usually don't have many problems with that. I don't think you do either.
No.
You can empty the glass.
No, I'm pretty good at emptying the glass. So when you do this, though, and another way to work through it. So the one thing you do not want to do is wash your glass out with water.
Yeah, because you dilute it.
Because that's just worse. That's worse than leaving the wine in there.
You really will.
So and then you can swirl it. You see this done a lot.
Or if you do wash it, dry it. You won't be able to do that in a winery. But if you're having a fun tasting with
unless you're bringing your own water and
Well, Sarah and I do tastings all the time at home. We'll try some different wines and we'll Yeah, so if you're short on glasses or you don't want to wash them, just rinse it, but then dry it out. Don't leave that water in there. Yeah, this PV is one of the few truly aromatic red grapes that are out there.
Can you see how deep it is? I don't know if you can see you can't see through it.
Yeah,
I'm holding it up to the light, and it's actually the light. I can't see the light through the wine.
yeah, but PV you get it's a really aromatic grape for a grape. Well, depends on which clone you use. This is a clone called Clone 2, and it is really aromatic. The predominant one that people plant, and I have a bunch of it too, is Clone 400. And it doesn't give off this, doesn't give off these aromatics at all. This is why but why I've always 400 is a lot easier to get right, but I kept this Clone 2 because it provides so much of a bouquet.
Ooh, like swirling around in your mouth. It's really, really.
It's very tangy.
There's so much going on.
It make you pucker up here in the back.
It does, right? It does. It does.
It is really a hypertanic wine.
It's a good feel for a wine. So, this is Petit Verdot. That's one of my favorites. It's a stronger wine. It's a fuller-bodied wine. It's
real chewy. That's what people talk about
chewy. Yeah,
because it makes you want to chew. Yeah, makes you want to chew. It is. It's like an espresso shot, except it's a glass full of it. But it's like a really strong espresso.
And that's sometimes why they call that's a
where you
that's
get
a coffee
stuff.
feeling.
Yeah, it really tastes
because
like coffee.
It gives your mouth the feeling like you're drinking coffee.
Yeah,
instead of wine.
Yeah,
it's the same. What do they call that when it's the same reaction?
Yeah,
body reaction.
Yeah, no, this is not a wine for everybody. I mean, it's a great wine. I'm just saying, you have to have a pretty tolerant palate to drink this wine. It's one of the things I learned. There's a guy named Tim Haney who wrote a book called Drink What You Like. He's a master of wine. Worked a lot with the folks at Cornell in the food science program. And, whether one likes a wine like this and can drink it without it being overwhelming to them, it all comes down to the number of taste buds per square inch on their tongue.
Whoa.
And ironically, this is not universally true, but on average, women have a larger number of taste buds on their tongue than men. Although, again, that's not a universal truth. It's just on average.
Right, right.
And the more taste buds you have, the more sensitive you are to very astringent drinks like that PV or that black cup of coffee or even an espresso shot. And that's why there's a stereotype out there, but there's some truth to it that, hey, women prefer white. It's because the average woman has more taste buds on their tongue, and where you and I would like a wine like this, they can be overwhelming.
It's almost offensive.
Yeah, and it is offensive.
Yeah.
And so a really good indicator is, whether you're a man or a woman, is do you like milk with your coffee? If you're a milk with your coffee kind of person or a milk and sugar with your coffee, you're going to gravitate more toward whites because that milk and that sugar kind of round it out. But if you're hey, I love black coffee, really strong, I like espresso, you're going to gravitate to reds. It's all just about the number of taste buds on your tongue. So there's nothing, it's not like you have a unsophisticated palate or there's something wrong.
It's never right and wrong. By the way, never right and wrong.
Some men have 4,000 buds per square inch. Just like even exceeding the averages that a female will have. So
buds per square inch. It's a new term now.
Yeah, but it's real. And again, that's a general rule. But there's men that have a lot, and there's plenty of women that have 400 buds per square inch themselves, and so they love these deep, dark, tannic red wines. But as a general rule, for whatever reason, women have a tendency to have more. But that's not.
That would make sense.
It's not universally true, but on average,
because they're more discriminatory towards their food selections.
Well, my wife is for sure.
But as is mine. But it's like they know what tastes better for them, and so for us, it's just like, well, just throw
I will say
down.
this too. There's a myth that, well, if you only have 400 taste buds per square inch on your tongue, you can't taste things that other people can. It's not true. You just need to tune in a little bit better. So it's not like you can't if you're a big dark tannic red wine drinker, doesn't mean you can't appreciate a white wine and pick up on everything that somebody with 3,000 buds per square inch can pick up on. But you do kind of need to listen a little.
Right.
You need to work. You just need to tune in a little more.
Exactly. And when you're doing that wine tasting, that's what helps you understand a little bit more. You're focused, and that's the more one of the more important scenarios with a wine tasting is that you're focused on what you're tasting. You're paying attention to, okay, what is this that I'm experiencing? What's the smell? What's the aromatics? What's the taste? How does it work for me? And how can I get the best out of that? All three of these, I love all three of these for different reasons.
Yeah.
And I would drink all three of these in different scenarios and different settings. And one of the things that we haven't talked about yet, but we've danced around it a little bit.
Yeah.
We've talked about a standalone wine.
Yeah.
So some wines, you really want to pair it with something.
Mm-hmm.
Other wines are standalone. You can drink it without any food at all. But not every wine is. Some wines are just meant to
if you
have
try
food
to, if you
with.
drink this whole bottle, your palate would be really tired. Or let's say you split this with somebody you're with, your spouse, partner, whatever, friend. Like you're going to be tired. This is a wine
Right.
that eventually will need some food because if you
Right.
drink, it's just
Right.
it's just too much. On its own, beyond a glass or two, you need some food to go with it.
You maybe, but
But conversely,
Yeah.
there's some wines
Yeah.
you can just drink all you want and
all you want. Yeah.
never get tired.
Yeah, I think one of those is probably the Chardonnay because it's so crisp and it's so light. I hinted at it earlier. You can get carried away without even blinking, because it just goes down so easy.
Well, that's the other trick too with acidic wines. That acidity makes you want to drink more, so that just all the more reason why you just keep going back at it.
Yeah.
It'd be dangerous on a summer day.
Yeah. Well, and if it's 95 out,
Yeah,
you got to do something.
you gotta do something.
You got to do something. So, all right. So, Petit Verdot, you said it was Clone 2.
This one was every vintage I've bottled since then was
And
a
it-
mix of the two. But this is my last Clone 2 only batch I've ever made.
Really? Are
everything
we
else is-
going to get any more Clone 2?
Oh, I could down the road, but it's blended in with 400 and all my.
It's out in the field somewhere, right?
That's 19, and then for 20 and 21, it's a blend of the two.
Okay. And is that Rose 11 and 12B or something?
No, I forget what numbers are. I know where they're at. It's 119 through 1 something. I don't know. There's
Okay.
11 rows of the original.
Oh, that's actually a significant amount.
No, I've got an acre of it.
Yeah,
I've got
that's
more
pretty
Petit
good.
Verdot
Pretty
than I've
good.
got anything.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
That's cool. But it is a good blending wine.
Oh yeah,
The grapes are good to blend with other stuff. So
They do. I don't use it that way. I was intent on making a varietal wine with it because I wanted to make a wine that was big and deep and powerful. And I, through my experimentation, just realized like this is the grape to do that with.
Yeah.
This is what I want. This is what the majority of our red wine consumers want, which is something that can rival a hot climate grape, a hot climate red wine.
right.
And this will do it. And that's why I grow it.
Yeah. Yeah. And it grows well here.
I mean, quit screwing around with, we're going to do some Bordeaux blend, blah, blah, blah. That's cool other wineries do. Like, man, nope. You want power? I'll give you some power.
And
I will give you a powerful wine.
And exactly. But the problem is here, in just west of Philly, we're the environment, the weather.
Yeah.
It's a lot more work to grow some.
That's why it grows. The berries are so small. That's why it's so concentrated.
So much work.
I mean, we crushed this grape.
How big are the berries? So, because are they like berry sized?
They're the size of a pea.
Exactly, right. So a typical grape, that you eat in the store.
I'd say a typical wine grape is the
huge.
size of a blueberry. Here,
A big blueberry.
pretty big blueberry.
Yeah.
And a Petit Verdot berry is the size of a pea.
Half the
Yeah.
diameter.
I mean,
so to
when
speak.
we crush it here and put it in the fermentation vessel, like there's not even juice in the bottom. It's just mushed up grapes. There's so little liquid compared to the
Right.
volume of skin. Wow. It's just very. I mean, by the end of the fermentation, yeah, there's some juice down there. It's what we make the wine from. But like at first, there's no juice. It's just mushy grape. There's no. Wow. Usually when you
right?
run it through the crusher, right. You've got juice and
it's just flowing everywhere.
No, this is just now you just have mushy grape. There's no juice. The juice does eventually leach out during the fermentation. It will leach out from the crushed berry, but like it is, there's so little.
So if you were wondering why a red was more expensive.
Oh, yeah. I mean, the yield
is different, right? It's all about the yield.
Yeah, especially if you look at the volume of liquid. Now, tonnage-wise, the tonnage on the PV, I mean, it comes in, it's the same, but most of that tonnage is skin. I mean, the liquid portion of that tonnage is far less than with something like Merlot or Franc that has a much bigger berry.
Which gives it a bigger flavor.
Yeah.
Yeah, gives it a lot bigger flavor. And then we experienced some sugar.
That is so those are wine diamonds. Tartrates. So
it looks like sugar though.
It does, but it's not.
It's not
tartrates.
Sorry, that was misinformation.
No, it's tartrates. It just means that wine has a lot of acidity.
He's just pulling out more words.
This means that wine. You talk about a wine that can age. That this wine, of all the wines I've ever produced, this one will age the longest because the subsequent versions I've made of this grape, as I said, blended another clone in, and that clone too will come in the winery at about 3.1 pH, which is lower than most of my whites.
Wow.
Versus
that's like
400 will come in at 3.5 or 3.6, about like any other red. So it's a really unique. I would tell you they're almost two different grapes. I mean they are both PV, but it's remarkably different.
Yeah, that's low.
Oh, dude, it's crazy.
That's really low.
I remember Gabriel looked at it the first time we ever picked it. He said, I've never seen a red grape with that kind of pH, with normal sugar levels. And
wow.
Sugar levels are pretty good.
Yeah.
I mean, they're 22, but sometimes I can get up to about 23 and a half bricks, but that comes in at about 22 bricks, which is pretty good for around here. And
bricks, tell me about bricks.
That's the amount of sugar in the juice.
People think, so contrary to popular belief, or maybe not, maybe just people just don't know that, but sugar is actually what assists the fermentation process.
Well, that's what turns into alcohol. Yeah. The more sugar is in the juice.
So without sugar, it wouldn't be worth drinking then.
It wouldn't be no alcohol.
It'd be just
the yeast turns the sugar
juice.
into alcohol.
It'd be just good tasting grape juice.
Yeah, but 22 bricks is equal to 220 grams of sugar per liter.
There you go.
Coca-Cola has about 100 grams of sugar per liter. Ooh. So if you just want to put it in perspective, how much sugar comes in.
So, but what's interesting though, if you drink a can of Coca-Cola, you're actually consuming more sugar.
Yeah, here you're just consuming alcohol. There's no sugar in this. It's all alcohol.
Well, it can convert, but
that's what I'm saying. But like it's converted alcohol, so this wine has no sugar in it. Whereas if you drink a can of Coke,
that's nothing but sugar.
You drink about 40 grams of sugar.
We're not downing Coke if you like Coke, but it's the comparison.
You're yeah, exactly. But here you drink no sugar. The sugar's been converted to alcohol.
Right. And the alcohol is good, right? I mean,
it's great. But that's why alcohol does. That's why some wines taste sweet even though they're dry. Alcohol has been converted from sugar, and it has a perception of sweetness in many cases.
Right.
Especially the colder the wine is.
Yeah.
It will create a perception of sweetness.
Yeah.
Will also make the acidity more pronounced when the wine is colder. So it's interesting to play around with temperature because a wine can be quite sharp, especially a rosé or a white will be perceived as being a sharp or like really acidic when it's like tooth cracking cold. When it warms up, that it won't taste as acidic. The temperature just changes.
Right.
I don't know why, but it does.
Well, yeah. I mean, yeah.
That's the way God made it. I don't know.
I'm a lot sharper if I'm cold. I can tell you that.
Yeah, there you go.
Well, I wouldn't mind be. So this has been great. Do we have anything else we think people would? I don't.
Probably, but
we've just spent like almost an hour.
We probably have used up our audience's attention span. So there's lots more we could talk about next time. I do think the pairing thing will be fun.
That is going to be great because then we'll tantalize you with some food choices.
For sure.
And then we'll pair it with some wine, and we'll make sure that we share why it's paired with the wine.
You're talking about congruent versus contrasting pairings.
Right. Yeah. So then you'll have a better understanding of, okay, if I'm cooking that turkey dinner or if I'm doing steak or burgers on the grill, what am I going to throw out there for people to enjoy with me?
Yeah.
So, are we good, right?
We're good, man. Thanks so much for having me on.
Hey, everybody. Thanks for joining us for our first Tipsy Tagalongs podcast. This has been Ben Cody and Gary Moore with 1723 Vineyards and American Wine Journey, and I'm with Tipsy Tagalongs and Journey More Often. In 2 weeks, we're going to be at the Kennett Brewing Company where we're going to be tasting some beer.
I'll be in the audience heckling Gary.
Yeah, this is going to be a fun because Kennett Brewing comes. They're a pretty fun place to go.
It'd be fun to be a heckler.
So just if you want to see these podcasts, I'm loading them up on our YouTube Journey More Often YouTube channel, and they're also the link to that can be found on journeymoreoften.today. Also, I think that Ben puts them up on the 1723.
We do, yep, we do.
So you can find them in different places. Google, click, and go.
Sure.
All right.
Yep. Cool.
Thanks, everybody. Until
Thank
the
y'all.
next time.